back with more reading from me. Welcome to me in my pajamas. I am on day 12 of social distancing and isolation and stuff. And I'm losing my mind a tad, but it's all good. I did get bopped by the lonely stick today. I'm sure many of you guys either have felt that or are going to feel that soon. It's a good time. So I thought for today's reading, I would read a chunk of one of my favorite books, Sara Bareilles, Sounds Like Me, My Life So Far in Song. It's a book of essays she wrote, inspired by different songs she's written, about the times in her life that inspired those songs and such. So this is a chunk from her chapter about her song Red. It's a little bit of a longer chapter, so I'm just going to read the last half of it. For context, at this point, she is talking about when she was studying abroad in Italy in college, and she is listing the pros and the cons of when she was there. The last con is that she was very lonely. So that is where we are starting, and we're just going to truck on through to the end. I was desperately lonely. Even at my best, I still only spoke rudimentary Italian. There's only so much of yourself that gets expressed in "one ham sandwich, please," and "I am student, I study the communications, I eat 3 pizzas today." In any given situation, I could only express a fraction of what my brain was thinking or feeling, and it felt like I was projecting a dulled sense of my own personality. Because of my limitations with the language, I had very little nuance, no humor, no bite. It's maddening to be in a conversation wanting to show someone who you are while expressing yourself like a child. It kept me feeling isolated from my Italian friends and leaning hard on my American ones, who were great, but difficult in their own ways. I had fiery friendships that were fraught with unnecessary drama, and by the sheer nature of the study program's design, everything felt temporary. One year of all of this craziness, and then we'd all go back to our real lives. I was living in a strange limbo world, not totally connecting to what was immediately around me, but still incredibly far from what I would be going home to. I couldn't shake this feeling that we were all in suspended animation during our year in Italy. It didn't matter what I did because my actual life was waiting for me at home. I experimented with things I had never done before, feeling like it was justified because I was in an alternate universe. I made stupid, rash decisions and let myself off my own leash for a while. It was my own personal Rumspringa. I was exactly like an Amish teenager on a free pass to explore the world outside my community. Note to self, find a better metaphor before the book goes to print. I started smoking. I got my eyebrow pierced. I barely went to class. I asked for rides on scooters with random dudes late at night. I drank many drinks many times. I took ecstasy that didn't work at a dance club, and everyone else felt gypped and I felt relieved. In trying to find my footing, I lost my grip. One night, I smoked weed with 2 of my American girlfriends on my couch, watching a documentary about Bob Marley. The night started out breezy. We were laughing, making dinner together, and I felt light and warm the way marijuana and Bob Marley are theoretically supposed to make you feel. Then I felt a shift, and the sensation turned a corner into something colder and darker. I started to hear my internal monologue at a screaming volume, and it was telling me I was crazy. I left the girls in the living room without telling them what was going on and went to lie down in the little twin bed of my peach-colored bedroom. I put on Fiona Apple's Title, one of my favorite records, and the room was spinning around me as she sang Sullen Girl. I frantically wrote in my journal, trying to keep up with how fast my thoughts were coming, but the whole act of it scared me further. I felt out of control. It wasn't just too much marijuana. It was a kind of homesickness, but not for my life in LA or anything that had come before. I craved some sense of knowledge that I was going to be all right out here in the world, all by myself. The day that followed was terrible. My emotional hangover was thick and thorny, and I felt antsy, wanting to crawl out of my own skin. I had hoped I would sleep off the weird, crazy feelings and wake up normal, but my melancholy was everywhere, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. I sat in an internet cafe and wrote again in my journal about how heavy the feelings were, waiting for something to lift, but I had been introduced to what would become a leading character in my life. The melancholy that cracked open that night would eventually become something I'm deeply fond of, but we never know which monsters under the bed will become our friends, do we? I took a morning walk that led me into the belly of a tall Catholic cathedral, where I asked for God's help on my knees from one of the empty wooden pews. Please, God, guide me towards something that feels like home. I walked out of the massive church and its medieval arched doors back to my apartment and sent out my version of the bat signal. I called my dad. Through my tears, I told him that I was having a really hard time and that I thought I needed him to send me my keyboard immediately. I don't know why that was my solution in the moment, but it just was. A smarter, savvier person might have noticed that they actually sell keyboards in Italy, but back off, I'm having a crisis! Aside from singing a couple of times in a restaurant that belonged to my friends, I wasn't involved in anything music related, and I hadn't been writing at all for the months I had already spent in Italy. The black and white keys of my shitty little keyboard were the only things I could think of that felt like a safe place to go. My darling father took it to FedEx that very morning, and I was at least a little bit relieved to know it was on its way. I was less relieved to know that with shipping and taxes, it was going to cost us around $600. Merry Christmas, FedEx! The sky took its cue from my stormy mood and opened up with torrential rains as I arrived home to my little apartment. Being inside felt worse than being wet, so after I hung up with my dad, I gathered my Walkman, and an umbrella and headed out in search of something I hadn't identified yet. A few doors down from the entrance to the building was a large commercial music shop. I absentmindedly made that my first stop. They had big walls of books of sheet music and racks of CDs and those gigantic useless plastic bricks they used to come in, and a small selection of musical instruments. I walked past the headphones, guitars, small keyboards, and amplifiers straight to the man behind the counter. I thought I could inquire about piano lessons, maybe, or practice rooms, but I didn't really know. I was fumbling over the words themselves as well as tears so fresh they could begin again at any second, but managed to ask about piano lessons. This particular store didn't offer them, but the man was kind enough and spoke slowly and said there was a small music school relatively close to our neighborhood. I had a destination now, at least. This was before we held phone-shaped maps in our hands at all times, so it felt more like a treasure hunt than anything else. I darted between rain and the porticos and big overhangs that are on practically every building in Bologna. And after some time searching down small streets, I saw the tiny white sign that said Merry Melodies. The roll-down metal gate was mostly closed, but there was a light coming through the window from the back room. I rang the bell. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and a smile came to the door, raised the gate, and hurried me inside out of the rain. He spoke to me in Italian, saying that the shop was closed for the day and the piano teacher wasn't there, so I'd have to come back another time. As I stuttered through thanking him for letting me in, my unrefined Italian tipped him off, and he immediately broke into English. I would come to learn many things about Michael Bruscia in a very short amount of time. That day in the lobby, I learned he was an American music teacher who had been living in Bologna for 20 plus years, thus giving him an endearing hodgepodge mashup vocabulary and pronunciation. He says things like California, and that's just fantastico. He is from Wisconsin, which he visits every 3 years, and has a son named Daniela, who is also very musical. He moved to Bologna after marrying his Italian wife, and he conducts a jazz orchestra called Born to Swing in addition to giving saxophone lessons and running the studio. I would eventually learn that Michael argues passionately about Bob Dylan's canon of work. He can drink anybody under the table with great cheer, as I imagine Santa Claus might if he were a drinker. And best of all, he has an enthusiasm for life that makes you question your own tendency to think anything isn't amazing. He was genuine and warm and so curious about my being in Bologna, and we went very quickly from talking about the prospect of piano lessons to discussing life in Italy as an American. We spoke about music and why I felt compelled to take lessons. I told him I was a singer and a beginning songwriter, and he immediately invited me to share something I had written. I was hesitant, but he was so sure that it would be wonderful that I kind of wanted to see for myself. He ushered me into the small, cluttered lesson room adjacent to the tiny lobby entrance. Lit by an old side table lamp, the room had an upright piano, stacks of sheet music, books, a couple of chairs, and an old record player in the corner. I sat down at the piano and scanned my brain for anything I could play by heart, which was not very much. I nervously settled on one of my original songs, Everyday Stranger, and after I finished, Michael applauded and begged for another song. I felt proud. I played Gravity, which was one of the other songs in my repertoire. He showered me with compliments and fantasticos, and I blushed and felt special and good and deeply happy for the first time in a long time. Michael asked me if I knew the album Blue by Joni Mitchell. Of course I had heard her name, but I had to admit that I wasn't familiar with her music. I had just recently ended a phase of my life where I listened almost exclusively to NSYNC and Britney Spears, but I omitted that part. He felt a need to share a particular song with me. The crackle of the vinyl began, then the jangly chords of the dulcimer. Then I heard the pure arrow of Joni's voice pierce through the instrumentation, and something in me. The song he played was California, and I cried. Silently facing away from Michael, staring at the keys of the piano. Her words bloomed into vivid pictures in my mind. And her message, delivered by the way of that delicate, haunting soprano, made my heart swell. I felt like somebody had thrown me a rope. The song made peace with living between two worlds, and I somehow felt understood and comforted immediately, in spite of not knowing what a sunset pig was. I felt relieved listening to her capture the rapture and mystery of a foreign place, and, in the same breath, ache for a sense of home. It was so pure. I told Michael how homesick I was, how I missed a sense of myself. He understood completely. Even for someone who had long since made a very happy life in that Italian world, he could relate to the feeling of missing where you come from, at the same time knowing that you can never really go back. Michael and I listened through that song and a few others off her masterpiece album Blue, and I immediately felt an urge to make my own experiences sing like that. In my own way, of course. I could try and build songs that might serve as monuments to my own private revelations, and make them into something that wouldn't terrify but enlighten me, teach me, release me too. In that moment, I wanted to go straight to my piano and unravel the mess of emotion and anxiety inside me and make it into something beautiful. It felt like pieces of some puzzle had clicked into place, and music was the sole center of it all. Songwriting wasn't a hobby. It was my lifeline. Michael and I spoke for about an hour, and I left lighter with a sense of direction. He invited me to come back the following week, and I did. I took a couple of piano lessons, but after Michael suggested I come sing some songs with his jazz orchestra, I focused only on that. He made me mixtapes of songs to learn by some of the greatest women in jazz. I got to know Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, and Billie Holiday. I started singing standards with Born to Swing on a regular basis, and we played at clubs, weddings, parties, community events, and even a jazz club in Milan called Ca Bianca. At the end of the performance, the owner of the club presented me with a bouquet of flowers, and we took photographs while the audience cheered like I was somebody. My picture was in the local Milanese paper the next day, and I have to say, that felt pretty fantastico. My keyboard arrived a week or so after my quest to Merry Melodies, and after a snafu with the voltage of Italian outlets, a certain burning smell, and me again realizing I should have just bought a fucking keyboard in Italy, I got my writing station settled and started pouring my stories into music. With my keyboard next to my bed, I felt less alone, like I had a friend that wouldn't leave my side. I wrote the song Red in the same peach-colored bedroom where I thought I was losing my mind. It spoke to my recent realization that I felt out of bounds and couldn't depend on my parents or my past to save me, but that was okay. I felt whole again when I wrote the lyric, "How you love is who you are." It sounded like me. I gained a little patience with the uncertainty swirling around me, and through writing about my experience, found my way back to something inside myself that I recognized. I surrendered more fully to what was out of my control and started feeling less sorry for myself, which continue to be two of the fastest and most effective ways to change my perspective. So that is that. I hope you guys are doing okay. We're all gonna get through this, and just remember, in the words of Sarah, how you love is who you are. Bye guys.